After about 25% of NFL Survivor contestants were eliminated in week one, we'll get you ready for week two as we analyze the 7 games you should consider in your NFL Survivor poll, and it's coming up next. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lee.
I'm Michael Wiley, and we're the Fantasy Football Consultants.
Michael, could you just say any given Sunday, any team can beat any other team, and any team can almost beat any other team?
Especially in week one, where you're not quite sure where people are going to show up, right? We saw Joe Burrow play and not show up. We saw the Rams look, pretty good in week one. We saw the Packers blow out the Bears. Does that kind of foresee what we're going to have all season long? I'm not quite sure. Let me give us a few stats real quick. We started with 208 people in our pool. We've lost 39 of them, myself included. And I wasn't the only one who picked Minnesota. There was a bunch, and hopefully not too many because of me. And that leaves us, we're down to 169 folks going forward in our poll. What are you thinking, Eric?
This is why I love doing this show. This is why I love following the NFL. It is so unpredictable. Who would have thought that after all the hype in the New York Jets that Aaron Rodgers would last 4 downs? Was it? It's just, I feel so bad for the Jet fans, but hey, they got to win. I don't know who is the most disappointed. Seahawks fans, because that's got to be way up there. Bengal fans, gosh, it was. How about New York Giant fans? It was a crazy week for a lot of folks.
It is going to be a very interesting season, as it always is. That's why this is one of the best sports out there, is the ability for any team on any given Sunday to compete and win. Should we talk about a few of the games, or should we go up to what we're going to see this next week?
Yeah, I'm good going straight to week 2. Was there anything? I think as we talk about the week 2 games, we're going to look back at some of the week 1 performances, and I think what we have to do is we're going from really not knowing a lot before week 1, now getting a lot of information. And do we want to we don't want to overreact to just 1 week, but let's see. Here are the 7 games that we think that you should be considering in NFL Survivor. There are 3 very large favorites. Interesting enough, all 3 of the underdogs are 1-0. We've got Buffalo 9 points at home against Las Vegas. San Francisco is 8.5-point favorites at the LA Rams. Dallas Cowboys are 8.5-point favorites at home against the New York Jets. Then we have Philadelphia, touchdown favorite at home against Minnesota. Detroit, 6 points at home over Seattle. And then 2 more games for you. The New York Giants, 4.5-point favorites at Arizona. And then the game I want to start with, Michael, the Denver Broncos, 3.5-point favorites at home against Washington. This seems to be a trendy pick. I get it. Denver does not have a lot of future value. I do think Denver is better than Washington, and they are at home. But you watched that Raider game closely. Can you tell me a little bit about this Denver team? What did you see in week 1 about the Broncos?
The Bronco team is still fresh with their new coach. They came out, had that nice onside kick. It looked like they got it, but the call went against them. There was a couple missed targets. Jerry Jeudy wasn't in. I think that made a difference. And really on the defensive side of the ball, they didn't quite look as crisp as they had the prior year. I think they will come out much better. Being home 2 weeks in a row is a huge advantage, even though they didn't get to take advantage of it in week 1. Washington looked pretty paltry against Arizona, almost gave up that win.
How did Russell Wilson look to you in the Sean Payton offense?
Yeah, I felt like he wasn't sharp. I felt like they kept him bottled up in the pocket again, probably for safety reasons. He got out a couple of times. I feel like he wasn't utilized. Like, they need to let him be utilized. Let him put himself at risk if this team wants to go ahead and win. I like their chances. I like this pick. But man, after what happened last week, I just think this game's going to be too close, and anything that's close could come down to turnovers.
Yeah,
So
so
I don't feel good about it.
So let me tell you where I'll take a stand. I'm going to brag when I'm right, and I'll admit when I'm wrong. I told you to stay away from Denver last week. I am going to tell you I can't trust this Denver team. I am not going to suggest that you pick Denver. I get it. You're like, hey, I want a team that has very little future value. Then just pick our next one, folks. We've got the New York Giants on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. I like this game, picking the Giants far more than picking Denver. Michael, I get it. People are going to look and see 40-0. You're going to tell me to pick the New York Giants and they lost 40-0. I want to talk a little bit about how that game started. The Giants got the ball first. They drove down the field, and then they lined up what should have been a very chip shot field goal, but they had a bad snap, so it was a little longer. It gets blocked, returned for a touchdown. Dallas misses the extra point, so they're already down 6-0. Continuing on, they then had a pass that was fine, but Barkley deflected it up. It was intercepted. It was returned for a touchdown. Long story short, and their normally reliable kicker also missed another field goal. If he makes those two field goals and one of them doesn't get blocked in return, and that interception return doesn't happen, instead of being down 26-0 at the half, it would have been 13-6. The Giants are not a team that you can expect and come back from that type of deficit.
Yeah, and Arizona is not anywhere near the caliber of the Dallas defense. I mean, this Dallas defense is so impressive, so quick, and actually is it has been an antidote for the Giants for a while now for how the Giants play. And so Arizona, I think they had 190 yards of offense against Washington defense, which is decent. The Giants defense is strong. Yes, Dallas kind of gave the recipe for how to pick on those rookie cornerbacks and see if you can't get some penalties. But I just don't see how Dobbs being able to do that. And so I don't know if this Arizona team is going to score another point this week. And so I really like this pick. You better bet Brian Dable, who I really like, is going to have a very conservative approach, which is just fine. They're willing to let, kind of different than we're talking about with Denver with Wilson, they're willing to let Jones go out and put himself at risk. And I think that's going to be tough on Arizona, whose defense looked okay against Washington, but I don't think will look as good against. The reason this line isn't any bigger is because of what happened to the Giants. To me, this is maybe the best lock of the week. I feel really good about this pick, Eric.
And to be clear, the New York Giants do not have hardly any future value. So it's great. And it was nice to see that after all off season, both you and I, and probably almost everyone else in the football community, said Arizona was going to be horrible and they're a terrible team. And after week one, I feel like it was all confirmed, because I don't think the Washington Commanders are a very good team. And then Howell fumbles the ball deep in his own end zone, gets returned for a touchdown. I mean, that was the only reason that game was as close as it was. So, man, I'm going to tell you my pick later, but I have no problems with you picking the New York Giants this week.
And just one thing to add, Arizona is actually no better at home than they are on the road historically. They don't get a home field advantage. So being in Arizona actually doesn't necessarily help Arizona. Slightly hurts the Giants to go across the country, but they're going to be hungry. They need this win. They're going to get this win. This one I feel good about, but I picked Minnesota last week. So
all right. So next on the list, look at this. Talk about a change in lines because of a week. The Detroit Lions at home, 6 points over the Seattle Seahawks. These are two teams I was extremely high on at the beginning of the season. I like Detroit. I told you to stay away from the Kansas City Chief game, but I also told you that you could pick Seattle against the Rams because Cooper Kupp is out and Ken Walker is going to play. Oh, my gosh. The only thing that saved me was I said save Seattle for their home game against Arizona, which I think is sound logic. Here's the deal. They played terrible, and I can't like dress it up to any good reason. Yes, I know on the defensive side, Jamal Adams was out, and their number one draft pick, 5th overall, Witherspoon was out, and they had injuries on their offensive line during the game. But come on, they were ahead at halftime in the Rams. For them not to score a point, and for the Rams to then beat them 30-13 is inexcusable. I refuse to believe that the Rams all of a sudden are a great team. I think this is on Seattle.
Yeah, very much so. I mentioned it last week. The Rams have Seattle's number. They have for a while now. That's something that did scare me. Aaron Donald has Geno Smith's number and scared him, and I just don't see Detroit being able to put that kind of pressure. But I will say I was so impressed with Detroit's defense this last week. They've cleaned a lot of stuff up. It's a different defense, both in terms of their ability to play the man coverage that their coach has wanted to do. You probably heard some talk during that game Thursday night about how their defensive coordinator is geared towards man and just hasn't had the weapons to do that historically. Well, now he does. And they can kind of vary that up. They've been really benefited by these Iowa additions, University of Iowa additions that they have with Hutch and Campbell. I do see the Lions winning this game, but not so strongly about it that I want to put my survivor life on the line for it.
Yeah, it was about this time last year that the Seahawks went into Detroit in a score fest and beat them 48-45. Look, I know Seattle played poorly in week 1, but I do not believe they're a bad team. They're not one of the teams that you feel like you should be picking against an NFL survivor. Not until we get some more evidence. I need a few more weeks where Seattle bombs. So I would strongly recommend you stay away from this game, especially since Detroit has easier games in the future. Just wait and save them. All right, so let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles. Touchdown favorite over the Minnesota Vikings.
My concern with this game isn't necessarily that Minnesota's better than the outcome of this prior game, because let's face it, Tampa Bay is one of the worst teams in the NFL, and to lose, I don't care how many turnovers that you give up, that's on the coaching staff, that's on the defense for letting Baker Mayfield make some plays towards the end of the game. It's really about the Eagles just not looking right in this first game of the season this last week. Their offense, they were gifted that game by some really, interesting developments that happened early in the game. And then they just didn't show up the rest of the game. I don't know if they're still on the Super Bowl, even though they lost, downswing, or if they are, they just felt like they could take the second half off. I did not feel good about Philadelphia's offense this last week. And so it makes me a little bit nervous that the lucky Minnesota Vikings could find a way to eke out a win. I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I feel pretty strongly that this line is about right where it should be. But I think save Minnesota for when they're all put together, because they're not put together right now. I don't know what that's all about.
You mean save Philadelphia?
I'm sorry, I meant to say Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Save them.
Yeah, how about save them just in the next 3 games, right? They in the next 3 games they face Tampa Bay, Washington, and the LA Rams. They also have some future value way down the road. They get Arizona in week 17 when they should be in full tank mode. So I would definitely wait. And you know what we talked about both on last week's show and in the preseason is that we have a high amount of respect for this Philadelphia Eagle team, but they lost some key components on that defensive line. They've replaced them with rookies, super talented rookies, but will it take some time for those guys? And they made Mac Jones, who I am not someone who is very high on, look pretty good last week. So I am both slightly afraid of a Minnesota upset and definitely feel like there's just time to wait here. So that brings us to the big 3, basically identical spreads: Dallas, San Francisco, and Buffalo. Let's talk about Dallas. Dallas is an 8.5-point favorite at home against the New York Jets. This line was 3.5 during the game. And as soon as Aaron Rodgers was out for the season, or most importantly, out for week 2, this skyrocketed to 8.5, which I don't know. Did Zach Wilson feel the slap on the face with that? Tell me, pick one of these teams. Do you want to talk about the Jets or Dallas, and give us your impressions?
Well, let's talk about the Jets for just a second. Their defense is right up there with Dallas's defense in terms of how impressive they are. You know, one of the things that Dallas took advantage of in that game against the Giants was some problems on the offensive side of the ball. And we all know, I mean, Breece Hall looked great. We all know that the Jets are going to have a tough time throwing the ball. I don't care how good Garrett Wilson is. What a nice catch, by the way. It's he can only do so much. Eric, tell me, I think this is Dallas's game to win.
My take, which I guess is slightly different than you, is I think that this spread is absurd. Is absurd. 8.5 points on a New York Jet team that just beat Buffalo, who I personally think is better. Now, granted, it had the great equalizer. They turned the ball over way too much. And here's the bottom line. Dallas plays Arizona next week. I'm not picking Dallas this week. I probably will use Dallas unless there's some significant injuries that happen out of week 2. I'll just take a vacation from Survivor and pick them against Arizona.
So I agree with you on the spread. And I agree that Dallas, I mean, let's remember, Dallas did struggle against the run last year. I think they are susceptible against, on the run, and the Jets are going to run the ball. Like, no question about it. So you're right. They took the ball out of Zach Wilson's hands and it paid off, right? They didn't let him make decisions and it paid off. They'll do it again because Robert Saleh still thinks this team has a chance to win. I think they probably know they need to get a quarterback during the season to make that happen. But let's try and minimize our losses in the meantime. Yeah, I think this game is going to be close enough to where somehow they may pull it out. I don't think so. I think Dallas wins this game, but I agree with you. Let's save Dallas for another week.
To be fair, they did have Zach Wilson make 2 decisions, hike and handoff. All right, so let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers. Boy, did they look impressive. 8.5-point favorites at the LA Rams, who admittedly looked great against Seattle. What are your thoughts here? I'll let you pick whichever team you'd like to talk about.
I think pretty much every poll in the nation right now has the Niners as the best team in football, and rightly so, because they just look so good on both sides of the ball. They did that even though the Steelers defense had a couple of sacks. They didn't look as bad as the score did, but the Niners had that game in hand from the get-go. They're the best team in football. The Rams are towards the bottom end, and the Niners have the Rams number. Just like the Rams have Seattle's number, the Niners have the Rams number. But the game's in LA. It's a rivalry game. The Rams are coming off, a nice win. The Niners are going to win this game. To me, this is the right there at the top likelihood of win going. But like you say, the Niners have a lot of future value as well. Do we pick them now? I think this is a lock. This is a pretty easy win for the Niners.
Yeah, this is why Survivor is fun, right? Because if you ask me who I think has the best chance to win this week, I think I would say the San Francisco 49ers. But that's not what Survivor is about. Survivor is doing 3 categories: most likely to win, pick popularity, and future value. Sometimes I say you don't want to consider future value when it's so far into the future. Michael, I will be attending in 2 weeks the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Arizona Cardinals. If you haven't figured out my trick in Survivor, look at Arizona's schedule. Who are all the teams left to play Arizona, and strongly discourage picking any of those teams earlier in the season. I think Arizona is that bad. That's my personal opinion. We've got the 0-1 Buffalo Bills, 9-point favorites at home against your undefeated Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to tell you without making a decision, I am having great difficulty deciding between the New York Giants or Buffalo this week as my pick. Tell me about your Raiders, which are one half of the equation.
A cast of characters that they've been playing with for the most part. It's really the same team as it was a year ago. And it was a bad team a year ago. And while I like Josh Jacobs and think Devontae Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, this team is not capable of competing with a healthy Buffalo Bills team at home, who's going to be quite irked that they lost this game against the Jets when they should have won. I think this is an easy pick, Eric. It's just whether or not you think that the Giants are so likely to win that let's save the Buffalo Bills for another week. And if you don't think Buffalo's worth saving, then this to me is a little bit more of a sure bet. Although I bet the Giants win by more.
So I don't think there's any question about how good Josh Allen is. I mean, folks, he's a legitimate star. But I don't know if I've ever seen a worse game that he's played, at least in recent memory. And 4 turnovers that he personally had, I mean, which just absolutely made the difference. I do not see, obviously, a lot that had to do with the Jets' great defense and great defensive back. I just don't see that is going to, he's not going to have a game like that against the Raiders.
Yeah, no, and actually, so Josh Allen's been a little bit of a turnover machine the last couple of years, which has hurt him, especially the latter half of last year. But actually, you want to talk about Josh Allen's bad games. His worst games have been against the New York Jets. Carte blanche. The last 3 times he's played against the New York Jets, they have shut him down. So that's the problem. They have his number. They have figured him out. Robert Saleh has done a great job defending against Josh Allen. Yeah, he lets him have a few runs here and there, and Josh Allen gets that, but that doesn't let him let up. The Raiders just don't have the ability to do that to Josh Allen. And so even if he turns the ball over a couple of times like he shouldn't have, like that snap, what happened there, I still think that they're going to beat the Raiders.
Yeah. So let's be clear. In comparing future value, the Giants almost have none, and Buffalo has a lot. However, Buffalo's future value doesn't contain what I call slam dunks. In other words, any games against Arizona or Houston, right? I mean, like their best game is like maybe at home against Tampa Bay, right? Which is in a very critical week, by the way, especially if you already burned Baltimore in week 1. My advice is similar to my advice week 1. What I said to you in week 1, I said, if you're in a pool where you have to make double picks down the road, so you're going to end up picking 23, 24 teams in the NFL when it's all over. I said, go with Washington, but I feel more comfortable with Baltimore. I'm going to give you the same advice. If you are in a league, usually those monster leagues on Yahoo or ESPN, where you're going to have to double up in picks in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and you can't pick the same team again, then I would go with the New York Giants. Use them and save Buffalo for later. But in our poll, you only pick 18 teams. You only pick one team each week. I'll go ahead and pick, which I think is the safer route, Buffalo. But it kills me, Michael, not to take advantage of this Arizona team, because I think the Giants, like you said, I think that the spread is overcompensating their 40-0 loss, and people just see 40-0, and it really wasn't that bad. What route would you go for week 2?
Well, I really liked how you broke it down. If you're in these two team leagues, then I definitely would go with the Giants. I do think Buffalo is slightly higher chance of winning, and therefore in this early season in a pool like ours, it's a safer bet to go with Buffalo. But I'm still going to go with the Giants this week because I feel like they're going to actually have the biggest win this week. They're going to show that they're that better team. And to me, it's a fun pick. But I have the luxury of already being out of our pool. So there you go.
All right. Well, we want to hear from you guys. Tell us, who do you like the most for Survivor this week and reasons why. And until next time, take care, everybody. We'll put on the screen 2 other videos that we think you'll enjoy.